So, Sarah, I want to start off by talking about why a company or a business would want to right size.
That's a great question. And typically it comes down to three main things or three primary things. Number one on top of the list is cash flow, or perhaps I should say lack of cash in the business. Number two is often that a founder has hit their risk threshold, right? They don't feel comfortable taking on more risk, whether that's in the business itself or in terms of, debt and financial risk. And the third factor is things like exhaustion, internal difficulties in the business, right? And that could be as a result of cash flow issues and dealing with the stress of the amount of financial and business risk you have taken. It could be that the company just internally isn't functioning well. And we'll dig into the whys of that in a couple of minutes, but if you have a business that just isn't operating smoothly, and when that happens, it can be a good time to say, let's take a pause and right size our business either temporarily or permanently to make things work a little bit better.
I actually want to take a step back from there. Could you explain to me what would cause a business to get into that position in the first place?
That's a great question. So, what I hear you asking is, like, how does a business end up with cash flow issues, or how does a business end up with internal difficulties or hitting their risk threshold? And it's a great question. And I think on a sort of a high level view, it often happens because a founder is building the business they think they should be building, or they're growing at a pace that they think they should be growing. And that is often sort of like the root cause of a lot of reasons and a lot of causes. But if we're going to get really specific, some of the most common things that I see are: number one, the gross profit margin of products. We talk about this a lot around here because it's so important, and we do a deep dive into it in the Rethinking Cash Flow episode. But if you are selling a product that has a profit margin below 50%, it means that additional funds from somewhere else, either your business savings or a line of credit or debt of some kind outside of the business, is needed to fund the continuation, not the growth, but just the continuation and maintenance of those sales channels or those customers. So we most often see this in distribution, and in wholesale direct relationships, but it can happen in all sorts of businesses. The other thing that plays a part, particularly in retail and distribution, is trade spend. Trade spend is such a high cost of doing business, and a lot of founders either don't know what they're getting into when they're signing agreements because they don't know what questions to ask, or they think they understand what they're agreeing to, but they don't have a full understanding. You might also be taking advantage of an amazing opportunity like opening a national retailer. And that's going to cost you $250,000 in some cases, just in, slotting fees alone. That's not accounting for any new distribution centers you might have to open. It's not accounting for any promotions that you may need to run. And you might enter into trade spend fully informed, but the results of that financial impact on your business may be unexpected and may cause cash flow issues and stress, just generally or related to debt, right? We also know that a lot of people use brokers and merchandisers, and these are valuable participants in the landscape of retail and distribution, but sometimes we onboard these supportive people and they detract from the profit margin of a particular, retail partner. And we may not realize that, right? What the expense is and how it's affecting our overall gross profit margin. So a lot of these come back to margin, as you can tell. The last thing I'll mention, and we've seen this a couple of times, we've talked about it, I think, a couple of times here on the show, is that brands get introduced into a new retailer, it's very exciting. They pay the slotting fees or they provide the free fills, and the sell through rate at those stores is not high enough for the store to keep them on the shelf, and they'll be discontinued within 6 months. I mean, we're starting to hear rumbles with inside the industry that that's simply just the model of certain retailers, that they'll onboard new brands, earn a bit of money in terms of those fees, and get them off the shelf relatively quickly. I mean, again, that's rumblings in the industry. It's not for sure information, but we also have seen for sure that when you're launching into a new retailer, there's a lot that's out of your control. You can't force your distributor to deliver to every store that you've just onboarded with. You can't always ensure that your product is on shelf and available when and where it's supposed to be. And so there are things that are out of your control that will have an impact on your cash flow and on your stress level, and on how you're feeling about running your business. And all of those things, you know, roll up to cash flow issues, risk tolerance issues, and potentially those stress and sort of internal difficulties. So these are some of the reasons a brand might right size by contracting from a nationally distributed brand to a regional brand, or from a regional brand to a local brand.